Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what is unfolding across the Iranian plateau right now demands directness. Everyone is focused on diplomatic negotiations. Everyone is analyzing the latest sanctions package from Washington. But that is not the real story. What we are witnessing is not a negotiation posture. It is not a defensive maneuver. What we are witnessing is the largest coordinated missile redeployment in modern Iranian military history. I am sitting here looking at commercial satellite imagery that has been analyzed by American defense contractors for the past 48 hours. And I need you to understand what these images actually show. They do not show routine military exercises. They do not show defensive repositioning around population centers. They do not show the kind of scattered deployments you would expect from a country trying to protect itself. What these images show is approximately 1,000 ballistic missiles being moved simultaneously to forward launch positions across 6 provinces. 1,000, not 100, not 200, 1,000 missiles with ranges between 300 and 2,000 kilometers being positioned in a coordinated pattern that American intelligence analysts are describing privately as, and I am quoting directly from leaked assessments here, artillery operationally ready for large-scale strike operations. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this deployment is fundamentally different from anything Iran has done before, why American military planners are quietly revising their entire deterrence strategy in the Persian Gulf, and why what happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether we are looking at a contained regional crisis or the beginning of the most significant military confrontation in the Middle East since Operation Desert Storm. This is the kind of analysis you need right now. Subscribe if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively studied by Pentagon strategists, and you are not getting this level of detail from mainstream news sources. Let's start with the geography, because it explains everything about why this deployment matters. Iran is approximately 1.65 million square kilometers. To put that in perspective, it is larger than the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Spain combined. The country is dominated by a central plateau with an average elevation of 1,200 meters, surrounded by mountain ranges. The Alborz Mountains to the north, the Zagros Mountains to the west and southwest. This terrain is not just difficult for ground invasions. It is nearly impossible to monitor comprehensively from the air or space. There are thousands of valleys, hundreds of tunnel complexes, and an infrastructure specifically designed over 40 years to hide mobile missile systems from satellite surveillance. Iran's ballistic missile arsenal is divided into several categories. Short-range systems like the Fateh 110 with ranges of 300 kilometers. Medium-range systems like the Shahab 3 with ranges up to 2,000 kilometers. And newer precision-guided systems like the K-Bar Shekan, which Iranian military officials claim can strike within 10 meters of their intended target. According to reporting by Defense Intelligence Agency assessments leaked to the New York Times in March and confirmed by multiple Western military analysts, Iran now possesses between 3,000 and 5,000 ballistic missiles of all types. That number represents the largest missile arsenal in the Middle East. Larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than the United Arab Emirates, larger than Israel's acknowledged arsenal. Commander Sarah Mitchell, a former U.S. Navy intelligence officer who specialized in Iranian military systems, stated publicly in a February briefing that Iran's missile force is, and I am quoting her directly here, the primary strategic deterrent for the regime. More important than its air force. More important than its navy, and the centerpiece of its ability to threaten American interests across the entire region. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of technical analysis anywhere else. Now, let's talk about what Iran has actually done in the past 48 hours. Announcement number 1, the deployment is not defensive. And this distinction matters more than anything else being discussed in Washington right now. When countries move missiles for defensive purposes, they disperse them randomly to make targeting difficult. They hide them near population centers where strikes would cause civilian casualties. They keep them mobile and constantly moving. What Iran has done is the exact opposite. According to satellite imagery analysis published by ImageSat International and confirmed by European Defense Monitoring Services, Iranian mobile missile launchers have been concentrated at approximately 60 discrete locations across Kermanshah, Ilam, Khuzestan, Fars, Isfahan, and Semnan provinces. These are not scattered. These are clustered in groups of 15 to 20 launchers per site. Each cluster is positioned with clear lines of sight to launch trajectories. Each site has been cleared of civilian structures within a 5-kilometer radius. Think carefully about what this represents. When you position missiles in concentrated clusters with cleared fields of fire, you are not trying to survive an attack. You are preparing to launch a coordinated strike. The clustering allows for synchronized launch sequences. The cleared perimeters eliminate obstacles for mobile launchers to reposition after firing. The specific provinces selected create overlapping range circles that cover every American military base from Kuwait to Bahrain to Qatar to the United Arab Emirates. CENTCOM headquarters at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, 300 American combat aircraft. Naval Support Activity Bahrain, home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait, staging ground for ground operations. All of these installations are now within simultaneous range of multiple Iranian missile clusters. Reuters and multiple regional intelligence services reported on May 13th that the repositioning began at 0300 hours local time on May 11th and was 90% complete within 18 hours. That speed is significant. It suggests months of prior planning. It suggests pre-positioned logistics and fuel. It suggests command structures that were already activated and waiting for the order. The International Institute for Strategic Studies described the deployment as, and I am using their exact language, indicative of an operational timeline measured in days, not weeks, implying imminent readiness for large-scale strike operations. Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, American intelligence detected this deployment in real time, and the response has been revealing. This is the part the Pentagon has been forced to acknowledge publicly. On May 12th, less than 24 hours after the Iranian deployment began, the United States diverted the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford from its scheduled port visit in Greece and ordered it to accelerate to the eastern Mediterranean. The carrier strike group, which includes 2 guided missile destroyers and 1 guided missile cruiser, is now positioned approximately 800 nautical miles from Iranian airspace. Simultaneously, B-52 strategic bombers from Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota were deployed to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. According to Defense News and multiple Pentagon correspondents, this represents the first time B-52s have been forward deployed to the Persian Gulf region since the initial phases of the war in Afghanistan in late 2001. But here is what is not being reported clearly. The American response is not offensive. It is defensive. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not positioned to strike Iran. Its air wing lacks the range to conduct sustained operations over Iranian territory from the Mediterranean. The B-52s at Al Udeid are positioned to strike Iranian naval assets or military infrastructure in a retaliatory scenario, not to conduct preemptive operations. What this deployment pattern reveals is that American military planners are preparing to defend their assets and respond to an Iranian strike, not prevent one. General Michael Kurilla, commander of U.S. Central Command, held an emergency video conference with regional military commanders on May 13th. According to leaked minutes reported by Politico, Kurilla told commanders to, quote, prepare for the possibility of large-scale ballistic missile attacks against multiple installations simultaneously, unquote. Not prepare to strike Iran. Prepare to be struck by Iran. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the implications for American strategy become impossible to ignore. Announcement number 3, and this is the part almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. Iran is not deploying these missiles because it plans to attack unprovoked. It is deploying them because American covert operations inside Iran have escalated to a threshold that Tehran perceives as existential. Between March and May of this year, 3 Iranian nuclear scientists have been assassinated. 2 in Tehran, 1 in Isfahan. On April 27th, a fire destroyed a centrifuge assembly facility at the Natanz nuclear complex. Iranian officials immediately blamed Israel and the United States. Western intelligence sources, speaking anonymously to the Wall Street Journal, confirmed that the operation was, in their words, a joint effort to slow Iran's uranium enrichment timeline. Then, on May 7th, 2 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps generals were killed in a drone strike in Damascus, Syria. Iran has consistently stated that attacks on its military personnel in Syria are attacks on Iranian sovereignty. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a statement on May 8th declaring that, and I am quoting the official translation, any further aggression against Iranian assets, personnel, or strategic infrastructure will be met with a response of such scale and intensity that it will reshape the regional security environment permanently. That statement was not diplomatic bluster. It was an operational warning. And 72 hours later, 1,000 missiles were moved to launch positions. The connection is not subtle. The timeline is not ambiguous. This is cause and effect. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The first story, the one you are seeing on CNN and Fox News, is about Iranian aggression. The narrative is that Iran is a destabilizing force, that it is threatening American troops, that it must be deterred or destroyed. That narrative is not entirely false. Iran does support proxy forces across the region. It does fund Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Iraq. But that is the incomplete story. The complete story is that the United States has been conducting an undeclared covert war against Iran for more than 15 years. Assassinations. Sabotage in a into cyber attacks. Economic warfare designed to collapse the Iranian economy and trigger regime change. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States kills Iranian scientists on Iranian soil, that is an act of war under international law. When the United States destroys Iranian infrastructure, that is an act of war. When the United States imposes sanctions so severe that ordinary Iranians cannot access medicine or food, that is economic warfare. Iran has not invaded another country since the 1700s. It has not stationed troops on American borders. It has not assassinated American officials in Washington. And yet the narrative in Western media is that Iran is the aggressor. The deployment of 1,000 missiles is not aggression. It is a response. It is a country that has been attacked repeatedly, covertly, for years, finally positioning itself to retaliate in a way that cannot be ignored or denied. President Trump responded on May 14th by stating that any Iranian attack on American forces would be met with, quote, "overwhelming an overwhelming and devastating force," unquote. This statement has not notably changed Iranian positioning. In fact, satellite imagery from May 15th shows that additional missile launchers are still being moved into forward positions, suggesting that Iranian leadership has made a decision and is not interested in American threats. European allies, including France and Germany, have privately communicated to Washington that they will not support military action against Iran if the United States is perceived as the instigator of the crisis. According to leaked diplomatic cables reported by Der Spiegel, German Chancellor Friedrich Steinmeier told the American ambassador that, and I am quoting, "If this war begins because of covert operations that violate international law, Germany will not participate and neither will most of Europe, unquote. That is not ambiguity. That is a verdict. America's closest allies are signaling that they do not support the trajectory of American policy. If you are an American taxpayer funding a defense budget of over $800 billion per year, what is happening in Iran is not a distant foreign policy story. It is a question about whether that money is being spent to defend American security or to provoke conflicts that make Americans less safe. If you operate a business that depends on energy supplies from the Middle East, this is not a geopolitical abstraction. It is a supply chain story that could disrupt global oil markets within 72 hours if hostilities begin. These effects are not theoretical. They are immediate and personal. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers of ancient Greece, went to war in 431 BC. The war lasted 27 years. Both sides were devastated. Athens lost its empire. Sparta was bankrupted. And who won? Macedon, a third power that had stayed out of the conflict, watched the two great powers destroy each other, and then moved in to dominate the entire Greek world under Philip II and his son, Alexander. The parallel to today is exact. The United States is Athens, a naval and economic power. Iran is Sparta, a land power with a culture of resistance and sacrifice. They are locked in a conflict that neither can definitively win, bleeding resources and attention. And who is winning? China. China has dramatically increased its economic ties with Iran. Chinese companies are building infrastructure across Iranian cities. Chinese energy firms are purchasing Iranian oil at discounted rates, fueling the Chinese economy while America spends trillions on military operations that produce no strategic benefit. Beijing has not fired a single shot. It has not deployed a single soldier. And yet, it is the primary beneficiary of American-Iranian hostility. Every dollar America spends threatening Iran is a dollar not spent competing with China in the Indo-Pacific. Every diplomatic crisis in the Middle East is an opportunity for China to position itself as a mediator and peacemaker. The Chinese foreign minister visited Tehran on May 10th, just one day before the missile deployment began. According to Chinese state media, he proposed a comprehensive regional security framework that would, quote, address the legitimate security concerns of all parties, unquote. Translation, China is offering Iran diplomatic cover and economic support in exchange for increasing Iranian dependence on Chinese markets. The United States is repeating the exact strategic error Athens made 2,400 years ago. It is so focused on its immediate rival that it cannot see the greater power rising behind the conflict. So, where does this leave us? Let me give you three clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, de-escalation through diplomacy. The United States halts covert operations inside Iran. Both sides agree to indirect negotiations mediated by a neutral party, possibly Oman or Qatar. Iran withdraws its missiles from forward positions. Sanctions are partially lifted in exchange for Iranian commitments on nuclear enrichment. This path requires the United States to accept that it cannot force regime change in Iran through coercion. It requires Iran to accept that it cannot develop nuclear weapons without triggering a larger conflict. Is this path likely? Only if both sides conclude that the costs of escalation exceed the benefits. Given the current political environment in Washington and Tehran, I assess this path at less than 30% probability. Path 2, limited military exchange. Iran launches a coordinated missile strike against one or more American military installations in the Gulf. The strike is calibrated to inflict damage but avoid mass casualties, a demonstration of capability rather than an attempt to start a total war. The United States retaliates with airstrikes against Iranian missile sites and Revolutionary Guard infrastructure. Both sides then step back, having demonstrated resolve. This path is dangerous because it assumes both sides can control escalation. History suggests that once missiles start flying, control becomes very difficult. Miscalculation, miscommunication, or domestic political pressure can turn a limited exchange into a broader war. I assess this path at approximately 50% probability because it allows both sides to save face while avoiding total conflict. Path 3, full-scale war. Iran launches a massive coordinated strike against all American bases in the region simultaneously. Hundreds of missiles overwhelm missile defense systems. American casualties are significant. The United States responds with a comprehensive air campaign targeting Iranian military infrastructure, government facilities, and potentially nuclear sites. The conflict expands to include Israeli strikes on Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iranian proxies throughout the region. Oil prices spike above $150 per barrel. Global recession follows. This path is catastrophic for everyone involved, but it becomes more likely with every covert operation, every assassination, every escalatory step that narrows the space for diplomacy. I assess this path at 20% probability, but that probability increases every day the current trajectory continues. I think we are closer to path 2 than the headlines suggest. The missile deployment is too visible to be purely defensive. It is a message. Iran is saying, we can strike you, we are ready to strike you, and you cannot stop all of our missiles. But the deployment is also too controlled to indicate an imminent attack. If Iran truly wanted to launch a surprise strike, it would not have concentrated missiles in such obvious patterns. It would have kept them dispersed and hidden. This deployment is coercive. It is designed to force the United States to acknowledge that Iran has escalation dominance in the immediate region, that American bases are vulnerable, and that further covert operations will trigger a response that American forces cannot fully defend against. But coercion is not the same as war. Iran is trying to re-establish deterrence, not start a conflict it knows it cannot win. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, if American covert operations are creating conditions for war, who authorized them and were the American people consulted? Second, if Iran launches missiles in response to assassinations on its territory, is that aggression or self-defense under international law? Third, if this conflict escalates into war, what is the strategic objective and how do we know when it has been achieved? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the questions that should be asked in Congress, in the media, and in every town hall across America before a single additional step toward war is taken. Tell me in the comments what you think the administration does next. Tell me if you believe diplomacy is still possible or if we are beyond the point of negotiation. Tell me if you think the mainstream media is covering this story honestly or if you are finding more accurate information from independent sources like this channel. We will keep tracking every development in Iran, across the Persian Gulf, and throughout the Middle East. That is what this channel does every single day. We provide the analysis you need to understand what is really happening, not the sanitized version you get from corporate media. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand why we are on the edge of another Middle Eastern war. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update when this situation develops further, and we will see you in the next briefing.